What's up, everybody? It's the Roundtable Sports Podcast. My name is Taylor McLean, and coming to you, we've had the Sunday and Saturday games in the books, so we know what the matchups are going to be for the AFC. We know everything except for the Cowboys versus Buccaneers on Monday, which I get why they had to do that because it's the Cowboys versus Tom Brady, which is a perfect storm of love from Cowboys fans and hate from everybody else, which goes both ways because there's Tom Brady loyalists and Tom Brady haters alike. So the perfect storm of ratings had to be on Monday, but that still means that I'm here waiting for the Cowboys to play. But in the meantime, we've had a lot of things settled out on the field. And the first game that I want to talk about is the Jacksonville Jaguars comeback win over the Los Angeles Chargers. Before we get to that, let's give a shout out to the sponsor, Evergreen Power Solutions. For our Texas listeners only, they're a concierge power company that can go in there, shop around, and get you the best rate for your energy right now. So save you money in the short term. And then in the long term, if you're anything like me, you don't go back in and try and renegotiate or shop around and get the best rates. They'll also do that for you when it comes that time as well. So you're not getting caught up in inaction like me. And they're not going to raise your rates should they not be able to find you a better one at the time it's time to renegotiate. So boom, savings and help. That's something I like to pass on to you. Give them a call at 888-886-6586. Use prompt number 2 and let them know that the Roundtable Sports Podcast and Taylor McLean sent you. Now let's get on to the Jags versus Chargers. Nearly always when I break down a individual game, I start with the winning team, and we're going to do that again today. But I have to tell you that with 5 to 3 minutes left in the second quarter, I definitely would have thought that the Chargers would have been the team that we were talking about first in this instant. And as we all know now, that's not the case. The Chargers were up 27 points before Jacksonville even sniffed any points. Getting that drive to get the touchdown right before half was obviously huge in the grand scheme of things. But just to give you a feel for how unlikely it is, and I don't put a terrible amount of stock into these numbers, but it's hard to ignore that the Chargers had a 98.8% chance to win this game with 3 minutes and 18 seconds left in the second quarter. I thought that stat was pretty incredible and something you would expect when this is the third largest playoff comeback of all time. I was a little kid who didn't quite understand everything about winning and losing, I think, when the Houston Oilers got beat by the Buffalo Bills in the biggest comeback of all time in the playoffs anyway. For reference, that game that they dubbed the comeback, which is a little on the nose, but I think is appropriate in this sense. The Oilers pick sixth the Bills with 141 left in the third quarter to go up 35-3. They ended up getting beat in overtime 41-38. This isn't quite that bad, right? A little bit earlier in the game as far as when they got up, so more time for the Jags to come back, and clearly with less points and not coming off of a devastating play like a pick six, but still pretty impressive. Also got to work in there when I went to the Wikipedia of the comeback, and apparently the famous statement that's been immortalized is the lights are on here at Rich Stadium. They've been on since this morning. You can pretty much turn them out on the Bills right now. Thought that was great. I imagine it being delivered by a stodgy old guy, because that kind of seems like stodgy old guy language. But anyway, as usual with this type of thing, I just wanted to see good football. I have a lot riding with my Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence stock. So to see Trevor come out and throw the 4 picks was pretty startling. And the Chargers definitely took advantage It's unfortunate for the Chargers and for Asante Samuel that this game will get lost to time and to the comeback a bit when he had three interceptions in the game. One of them, the second interception that Trevor Lawrence threw, I believe, was kind of when he got all over Evan Ingram and didn't allow him to move and then stepped up into the Trevor Lawrence pass. Probably should have been a penalty there, but the other two picks were really nice plays. And the fact that he made it, I guess, subtle enough that it didn't get called on the third one is still pretty impressive, even though it's a missed call. I posit that for cornerbacks and receivers alike, their ability to interfere on the defensive side and push off on the offensive side, and their ability to make that subtle enough to have it be effective but not have it get called is a skill in and of itself. And Asante took that to the limits in this game. And honestly, the referees let a lot of rough stuff with the wide receivers and with the skill position guys on both sides happen and go uncalled, which kind of favored the Chargers a bit, it seemed like, in the first part of the game, especially, but still not to put that one play and sum up all three interceptions or anything. And as I said, it sucks for Asante and for the Chargers not only to lose the game, obviously, but to have this game get lost in that comeback for him is not all that cool, because three interception games don't come around all that often, especially in the playoffs. I think this was the first time since Ty Law in 2003 I read that this had happened. So definitely kudos to him for making some big plays and getting the Chargers in position to have the lead that they blew. And also, as I said, with the second pick and the first pick was tipped. So not all Trevor's fault. And I feel pretty vindicated in the moment because I was arguing with the Herbert haters. And, I said, wins aren't necessarily the end all beat all when it comes to quarterback evaluation. I said, I still like Trevor Lawrence, even though he's having a bad game right now, too. This one game isn't going to be everything to me. Little did I know that humility would pay off instantly, and the Jaguars would lead off this comeback and give the Herbert haters something to talk about for sure, but also elevate Trevor in a lot of people's minds because of what he was able to accomplish on the field. And being able to hang in there after throwing four picks is a testament to his mindset and his attitude. There's a lot of guys that would have folded after pick two. So to have him, be able to hang in there after pick four, come back in there, get a touchdown before halftime, and then get the Zay Jones touchdown and all that, and really kick off that comeback and get things done in the end is pretty impressive. A big part of their comeback was him making tight window throws and putting the offense in position to succeed. This wasn't, they made a bunch of big plays that weren't Trevor's doing that got them back into this game. There were big plays, to be sure, on both sides of the ball and throughout the team, and the team deserves just as much credit as Trevor and Doug Peterson do. It's unfortunate and fortunate at times that the quarterback and the coach are pretty much the two main areas of scrutiny, no matter who wins, but they're the two biggest variables too. It's a multivariable problem. So just heaping the blame on the quarterback or the coach isn't right either, but still they're the biggest fulcrum of the way these games go, and they're tied at the hip. So Trevor Lawrence, we're seeing him now that he's tied to somebody like Doug Peterson, who is a solid offensive mind, who knows what he's trying to do and creates open passes and creates, concepts that gets guys open for Trevor. Has been a breath of fresh air throughout the season. And Trevor has really upped his confidence and been able to take the coaching from the coaching staff and build on what he already had. Part of what these guys learn or don't learn as an NFL quarterback is that they need to do everything they possibly can to put themselves in position to succeed and to make themselves the best version of themselves. Some guys get that they're not a finished product, and some guys don't. Kind of feels like to me that part of the reason that Kyler Murray is struggling is because I think he already thinks he's great, and he is great from a physical attribute standpoint, but I don't think he's been pushing himself in the same way that some of these great quarterbacks push themselves to bring themselves to the next level. I think Kyler has been kind of placing the blame around, and now the organization is locked into him, so he's going to have say on the coaching staff somehow. And I think that's a mistake. And we'll see if Cliff was the problem. We're going to get a good look at that. And I just have some questions on Kyler and whether he's pushing himself to be his best self. I think Trevor Lawrence has that gene up and down. And it's shown this season that once he got out of the shadow and the malaise of the Urban Meyer situation and got himself a real coach that can push him to that next level and show him what to do to be that next level quarterback, I think that's indescribably huge, even though I'm attempting to do so for Trevor and his trajectory and this organization's trajectory, because it's not an organization that traditionally lifts the team up and makes them better. Traditionally, the team succeeds despite that. And it takes a lot luckier and it takes a lot better drafting to get that done when you don't have that coach that has that clear vision, that can relate to the players, and that can lead a team the way that Doug Peterson has been doing and has shown in the past and present that he's capable of doing. And I think that means more to an organization like Jacksonville than it would to other teams. And I think he's going to have a lot of autonomy to tell them what he needs to retrofit this team around Trevor going forward. And they've done a great job already bringing in the guys they did. So not only did you get this win, but I think the arrow is pointing up for your future because Trevor's showing signs that he can figure this out. And you finally kind of got a regime in there that feels like they have a better idea of what they want, what they need, and how to get those guys. And getting them to Jacksonville too, because it's not like the same type of destination that some of these teams can be. And we'll talk about that with the Chargers and their current status in LA. That's something that factors into their situation going forward too, just like it factors into Jacksonville. And like you had to pay a little bit more to get Christian Kirk there. Fine. You did what you had to do to get Trevor retrofitted with some guys that could step in and be weapons for him. Because Marvin Jones has been a nice number 3 or 4, depending on how you look at Evan Ingram. But you see what pushing him down to his proper level on the depth chart and in the usage of the offense can do when you put guys and stat guys over the top of that. With Kirk, who I knew would be good, but I didn't know if he could be a true number 1. And I don't think that he's that because of his size, but I think he's really good and was a quality addition. And then Zay Jones, I underestimated how good he could possibly be in this offense. And sometimes the drops hurt and he's a little miscast that they have to ask him to do more possession work than you would like. But he's been really good. And his touchdown was super critical in the comeback. That play also illustrates Doug Peterson and what he can do because he gave the defense, levels that they had to deal with. And he gave the safety a choice and the safety made the wrong choice. And then Zay was able to run by him with his tremendous speed. I think I underestimated just truly how fast he is too. And with the size that he has, that's been huge. And then you're going to be able to hopefully place Calvin Ridley over the top of those guys going forward. Whether they bring back Evan Ingram or not, we'll see. But we don't have to worry about that for another week because Jacksonville was able to do this. And I don't want to undercut Trevor at all by passing out credit to the rest of the team. But as I said, it's a multivariable problem and you have to give credit where credit's due. But Trevor earned this win and earned a lot of people's respect with the throws that he was making and the poise he was showing, because a bunch of this was on him as far as the passing game goes. They had to get the ball out of his hands quickly, because the Chargers are absolutely capable of rushing the passer with 4, but to the Jacksonville Jaguars' credit, during the comeback especially, they were able to mitigate that and get the ball out of Trevor's hands while still being able to attack downfield too. And it's not like I felt like the offensive line played a dominant performance necessarily either. They held up, but 26 total pressures, 4 sacks, 15 hurries, and then hitting Trevor 7 times definitely isn't anything to sneeze at. And really, the running game that they got going was based on the Jaguars' ability to pass too. So I think that's part of the where I would look to upgrade when I'm looking to spend my picks and my capital for the Jaguars going forward. And this is them operating without Cam Robinson, who I don't think is a top 5 or top 10, maybe even tackle when you really sit down and look at it. But for the price they got him at, which wasn't the super duper top end price, but still well paid, and with his talent level, I think that they would have a little easier time moving the ball. Walker Little, to his credit, has played passively, but still, make no mistake, it was Trevor getting the ball out, Trevor having to maintain drives outside of the Zay Jones drive that kept them in this game and helped rope this comeback together. Going into the season, I had faith that Trevor would take some leaps, and I made a video, 21 plays that make me believe in Trevor Lawrence, which I highly recommend you go back and look at so that I can take a victory lap that I called it before we saw any sort of signs of hope and we saw the nightmare season that he had with Urban Meyer. So by all means, go look at that so that you think I'm smart, because I was on it a little bit before some people had seen it yet. But even then, being a supporter and seeing what I've seen this season, seeing Trevor pull this off and play the way he did, especially down the stretch, was impressive, especially when you throw the multiplier of how bad it had been in the beginning part of the game. And if you're going to give credit to the Jaguars, you have to throw a little shade at the Chargers on that part too. They did back off a bit and play conservatively, but even when you break it down from that angle, you have to think about how much patience that takes from Trevor Lawrence and the Jags to pull something like this off. I mean, they got the big play from Zay, but otherwise, that was them, breaking this off in chunks, running it at times, and knowing that you're not going to be able to get it all back at one time. Most teams run their defense along the principle that once they get up, they can rush the passer because the other team is really going to try and get it all back at one time. They're going to push themselves beyond their limits and beyond what the offense is capable of. And then the defense is going to be able to tee up and get after them and put this game out of reach. And then everybody's taking their pads off in the fourth quarter. So for Jacksonville to not take that bait and play the way they did to get this win is impressive, and obviously gives the organization excitement in the short term. But I think it's a great sign for their long term as well. They've got their head on their shoulders with their coach. They've got their head on their shoulders with a quarterback they can build around. And now it's about taking steps in the future to retrofit Trevor with a team that can win it all, because Trevor has that upside. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that if I got a call on Trevor Lawrence and it wasn't Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, I pretty much hang up immediately. I think Tom Brady is somewhere around this level as a quarterback still, but he's so old and has so many few years left, however many years that may or may not be. So disqualify him and you've got your big 5 here as far as quarterbacks I'd want to have going forward. And heck, throw it into the range of quarterbacks I'd trade Dak Prescott and at least 2, maybe 3 first-round picks for these guys, because I think they're so talented. They have the physical tools, and I think they can develop the mental ones to the point where they can be the best in the league. Patrick, Josh, and Joe are kind of already there from a maturity and from a decision-making standpoint. So now it's on Trevor and Justin to build on their respective performances. Trevor with a lot more stability, as it turns out, with his situation and organization, which is shocking to say when you think about what they've been in the past. So that's so super huge for the Jaguars in and of itself. And then, of course, it's an indictment on the Chargers, who have similarly been a mess, but should be further along in their life cycle, not only because Justin Herbert's, has an extra year on Trevor, but because the roster is a lot further along. Also, I don't want to move on to the Chargers before I give credit to the Jacksonville defense, who was put in impossible situations for a lot of the night with the turnovers and with, having to defend the lead. And the Chargers absolutely got conservative, don't get me wrong, on offense as well as defense, but the Jaguars played their part, and you can see that they have pieces that, should they add around them in a successful way, that they could be a good defense. I really like Walker and Josh Allen as an edge rushing pairing. I think they have versatility. I think they have a big time physical presence, and Walker especially is just scratching the surface. Josh Allen is a little bit further along, and maybe he's not a top super duper, top 5 rusher, but he's a good rusher, and he can be destructive, and he can do other things too. So you can add some secondary pieces on top of what they already have as a structure there. And the linebackers that they have are young. If they can kind of get their act together and be better positioned more of the time, and I think you've really got something here. So I didn't want to gloss over that part of it, that they were just as big a part of the comeback. And a sneaky reason that they were able to win this game is that they were able to disguise pressure and keep Justin off balance, both blitzing and not. So kudos to them, and exciting times in Jacksonville for their fans. And of course, now that we know what happened with the Bengals beating the Ravens, we know that we'll see Jacksonville versus the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City, and we'll see the Bills versus the Bengals in Orchard Park. So should be fun. The Chiefs play with their food a lot, and let teams stick around. And Jacksonville showed us today that you don't want to let them stick around in any capacity. And it wasn't just today. They've had other games. They had a nice comeback on the Cowboys, who we think are a solid team. We'll see if they're able to put things together against the Buccaneers. If you're listening to this, that'll probably be tonight. And while I still think the Chiefs are going to be the favorite, but after today, I don't know how much. And the fact that I'm talking about Jacksonville like that should mean everything to their fans, not because of me, because of their play. On the flip side, if you're going to have the biggest comeback, or one of the biggest comebacks, obviously it's not the biggest as we talked about, but if you're going to have that happen, that means that you're going to have the other side of it, and you're going to have a fan base that is extremely sad and upset with the way things happen. Say what you will about the SoFi games and how they're attended. I hear a lot of talk about them not having a home field advantage and not having a big Los Angeles fan base. But regardless of all that, you have to feel for the Chargers, even if you are a Herbert hater. As I talked about, this was a devastating style loss that is going to have repercussions not only in this year, but throughout many years for the Chargers. So, yeah, it's one game, and yeah, okay, you have a bunch of years of Justin Herbert left in front of you, no doubt about that. But I think this was bad enough that there's probably going to be some organizational shakeup, especially if the fans get their way. Organizations don't typically take the fans into account, however. So we'll have to just go with with our guts here, and with the thought processes of how bad this loss was. It'd be one thing if this was an aberration as far as time management and the conservative nature of your play calls and your play in this game, but this is not the case for Brandon Staley and the Chargers. As a matter of fact, I think this is about the most Chargers thing that I've ever seen. And it's not like I think that because Justin Herbert has done this so many times and they've had so many problems with him specifically Far from it. They've had these problems going back into the Philip River days, no doubt. And when you look back at how many years they had Philip Rivers and how little they did with him, it does leave me some concern as a Herbert apologist. But the thing is, the owner and the organization isn't going to fire itself. So there has to be a scapegoat here. And honestly, I don't even think you call it a scapegoat. Something has to change here with this type of situation. You can't go into next season with this hanging over your head and you have a slow start and then you fire this guy. That's just wasting another year of having just under cheap team control. And I don't think that's something that the Chargers can afford to do, especially with the amount of talent that they have around Justin. Mike Williams might be an injury machine and Keenan Allen might be on the older, but he's more apt to get injured. But when you see both of them on the field along with their other weapons, it's hard to deny that this team should have been better even with Mike out. And of course, that's one of the problems with Big Mike is he jumps high and he goes up and get it, but he does land and he does land awkwardly at times. And his play style seems to leave him injured more than your average guy. And between him and Keenan, that's held them back and taken a lot of the rhythm out of the offense and taken a lot of the upside out of the offense, especially when you're down to 3 wide receivers in the game because you lose one. But even if you wanted to call that a huge excuse and make that excusable, I just don't think that's possible. Maybe, just maybe, you let Brandon clean house on some of the offensive side and you try and go that route. But I think I just saw that in a worse situation with the Bears and rookie Justin Fields and like not really apples to apples with the comparison, but it feels close enough where you're going to go into this situation with a lame duck type guy that we don't believe in and just trust he's going to figure this out and get better. I've where I've seen that up close in person now that I'm thinking about it is Jason Garrett. And I think about how many wasted years that we had with Jason Garrett and what they could have done with Tony Romo, early Dak, all these different things, how things would have been different. And I think Joe Lombardi and his stiff, uninspiring play choices and Brandon Staley, who is a good defensive mind, but his conservative play calling down the stretch and ideology down the stretch really hurt them. And it's not the first time, and they melt down, and they need a steadier hand that can put them in a position to succeed, in my opinion. The good thing is that Justin Herbert makes you the job that an offensive coach would want to come into and settle into because of his talent. Say what you will about him, even if you're the biggest hater, but he has John Elway type physical skills. So you have to believe that you can get something out of that. And even if you can't make him his best self, that if you can put 95% of what he could be out on the field, then you really should be able to do something with your football team. If this team was able to land someone like Sean Payton, I think that would be huge. And I think with Justin in tow, that he would leave what he's doing now and get into. The only issue they have is maybe the Cowboys collapse in the worst possible way, like the Chargers did. And maybe Sean Payton chooses to live in Texas versus California. Maybe that's on the table, but it's going to take a pretty epic collapse by the Cowboys. And hopefully we don't see that. And that could make the Chargers the preeminent job. And even if it's not Sean Payton, they should be able to land somebody pretty good to try and lead the organization going forward. Even though, as I said earlier, they're not the most stable organization or the most well thought of as far as their spending, amenities, etc. But with Justin, I think, and not only Justin, but the talent around him, they have some top end and are well filled out in places that you can make that work. Whether they keep the GM too, I don't know if this was that earth shattering, but sometimes with these type of situations, and you just clean house too. So Tom Telesco could be out as well. I think he's put together a quality roster, and I think there's some hits here that I'd probably look at keeping him around and seeing if he could go one more guy and make this next guy the guy. But we'll see. A lot of moving parts there. for the Chargers, and I don't want to make this whole section obituary for them because it's not. There's a lot of good years for Chargers fans in front of them, but it would also hurt my feelings in the biggest way to see them waste any part of Justin Herbert's prime and make me keep apologizing for him when I don't think it really is deserved. Much in the same way, everybody points to Tony Romo not being a good quarterback because he never won the big one, or Dan Marino, or all these guys, or Charles Barkley. I think it's a multivariable problem, and while there's some things with Justin I haven't liked seeing, I think that he can get it figured out if anybody can. Like I haven't liked his throwing motion as much recently, and I think you can kind of point to the rib injury that he had earlier on in the season and say, you know what, might be a little compromised. And with some time to heal, not be hit, hopefully he can get back some of the power that I feel like he was lacking with. And I think that led to a lot of the sidearm stuff that he was doing because that kind of made everything not quite hurt as bad. So I think we're going to hear some things about that after the season is over on how bad that truly was, because you don't want to give that information, and put a bullseye on your ribs during the season. Not that everybody didn't know he hurt his ribs, but you don't want to let your opponents know just truly how bad it is. And then instinctually, I do feel like he is behind Joe Burrow, Patrick, and Josh. Those are his company for sure because of the physical tools, but I think he is a little bit more raw when it comes to that part. And, he's a little bit more quiet as a person when it comes to him as a leader too. So those instincts and those leadership qualities can't be overlooked at this point. But even when I rewatched the game, even when I saw the Chargers come up a little bit short on offense during the comeback, and I still can't point to Justin and say, hey, this was all your fault. This is because of what you did, and you're not going to be one of the guys going forward. I don't think that that's the case. And I may be the biggest Justin Herbert apologist of all time. That may be what this type of talk makes me. I have some skin in his game, no doubt about it. I said from the minute that he took the field that they can't ever take him off there for Tyrod Taylor because he is that talented and good. And turns out that the talent part of that was absolutely there. But we need to see development in this next year. And I think that'll come with a better offensive coordinator, because I just don't like the way that the Chargers have been calling their games. I think there's a lot more creative things they can do. And I think I see a lot more creativity in other offenses and with other teams that don't have a quarterback that's half as talented as Justin. And despite me saying that his instincts are a little off, they don't even have half the instincts that he have either. And I think a lot of the things with Justin are fixable with time too. It's just he's just in his third year, and there are leaps still left to take from a knowledge-based standpoint and from a confidence standpoint and a skill standpoint, like being able to look more guys off and be more fluid in the offense, and really, like I said, have an offense that fits him better. Even though Joe Lombardi comes from a Saints system, I just don't like the way that he was calling things and the way that he was trying to set things up at times. So get him out of here regardless. He's gone. I mean, that part I'm not worried about. The way that this offense could have been, I think that part was going to happen regardless if Staley leaves. And I say leaves to be kind, because it would definitely be a firing. He's not going anywhere if he can help it. And I feel bad that that's kind of what I have on this game, because Chargers, I think they deserve more. You had a good season, and just because it didn't come up Super Bowl in Justin's third year, I don't think is any reason to get pessimistic. I think that this might have been what you needed to galvanize ownership to the point where they actually do move on, and at the very least you're getting a new offensive coordinator. If this goes a certain amount of right, or goes even more, just a little bit more right, because everything had to happen in a certain way for this comeback to happen, that you're not getting a new offensive coordinator and you're not getting a new situation to bind Justin's prime to. Because as I said earlier, with Trevor and Peterson, coach and quarterback are stuck on you. The movie with Matt Damon and Gary Sinise, where they're stuck together at the hip in a Siamese twin style, coaches and quarterbacks are stuck together like that too. And while Staley has some good ideas at times, he's not a good adjuster. And in the end, a time manager either. And the Chargers need somebody that's a big plus in those areas because of their history and just because of who they are at this point. So we'll hope that they get him. All the Herbert haters want the Herbert Apologists Society, as I've dubbed myself and my supporters, will. And we'll hope for many more exciting games from both Trevor and Justin Herbert, because they're two of my top 5 favorite guys going forward. And I think they both have franchise skills, and they both have a ways to go to get all the way there, but they've got the physical talents in the meantime to get them there. And if things go a little bit more right for Justin and he has more of a supporting staff, maybe they get there too. But it's not this year, and it's because of a crazy comeback that left me nearly speechless. It took me a whole day to recover to get to this point. So, and we could be seeing this for years with Patrick, because they're all in the AFC: Patrick, Josh, Joe, Justin, and Trevor. So who's the real winner? It's us. It's the fans. Because high quality quarterback play, high quality coaching are what makes this league exciting. That's the reason they're protecting those quarterbacks so highly. Because once you hit a certain level with the quarterbacks, the games become really stagnant. The offenses don't move in an exciting way as much, and you just don't get as much quality football. Just ask the XFL, and we'll see what the USFL is able to come up with when they come out with, because what quarterbacks are they going to have? The NFL takes up like the top 60 to 90 at a given time. So then you're left with Landry Jones as one of the top guys. But hey, it got us PJ Walker. It got us Donald Parham in this game. So I'm all for it, because I get bored because I'm a football freak. And if you've gotten to this point in the podcast and are still listening to me, you are too. So download the podcast. Let me know that you're here and listening. Like and subscribe on YouTube. I've already got some videos ready to go. So you'll see a Trevor short on already, and probably a Trevor long video as well to kind of highlight the comeback. So look out for that. Look out for more podcasts on more of the games this week. We're going to get to probably the 3 or 4 that we get to in a given week. So look for that, and have a great rest of your day.